Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is, It's Tuesday, August 24th, 2021, and also time for another show, coincidentally, as it happens each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Let's see. Plenty going on today, plenty that didn't happen yesterday that's going to try to happen again today. Yesterday, as it turns out, they did, in fact, try to report out and vote on a rule for the 18,000 pieces of legislation they were trying to package together yesterday, the Civil Rights Act, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, along with the infrastructure deal, the bipartisan infrastructure, whatever the hell they're calling it right now, and a budget resolution. And in fact, it was the return of the deem and, or if you ask Republicans, deem on, pass maneuver yesterday, but it didn't actually work. It returned, but then they didn't open the door when it knocked. I guess there was a rule brought to the floor yesterday, as I understand it, in the late evening, which would have deemed a budget resolution passed without all of the details filled in, but that would therefore enable the use of reconciliation. And I guess it was offered up by the leadership as some sort of deal that was supposed to satisfy the group that began the day as a group of 9 and then expanded and contracted as the day went on. But the so-called moderates, probably better described as conservative Democrats, who were insisting that the bipartisan infrastructure deal had to be passed first before they would vote on reconciliation, which under the deal, the terms of the deal, and really pretty much under the terms of anything else, probably will actually happen. But what they really, really, really meant was, I guess, at the last minute we found out, well, we really mean we have to have a vote and final passage and signature on the bipartisan budget deal before we'll even consider voting on a budget resolution that would enable a reconciliation bill later. Once they found out how the process actually worked, the demands, I guess, sort of shifted. Anyway, the leadership offered up instead the possibility of simply holding a vote on the rule that would enable us to, 1, bring the bipartisan infrastructure deal to the floor for a vote, 2, set the reconciliation process in motion by deeming a budget resolution adopted. And I know a lot of people really don't like that. And it was a good guess. People calculated that, the conservative type Republicans or Democrats are going to balk at this too because it's something that Republicans like to yell at Democrats about doing and rename demon pass and scream as though there was something horrible about it. But of course, they like to pretend that it means that a budget has been adopted without a vote. But there is a vote. It's a vote on the rule, but if you really, don't like it, then vote no. And Republicans were going to vote no on the rule anyhow. And 2, of course, the budget resolution isn't actually binding in any way, except for the fact that it sets the table for the possibility of reconciliation, which they were likely going to do no matter when they vote on the budget or how they vote on the budget. That's simply going to happen. And the budget resolution can't be filibustered anyway, so there was no blocking it. So I really don't know what they were that upset about, except that they kind of wanted to look like they were flexing and being independent of Pelosi. And Pelosi wanted X, so they had to oppose that and ask for Y. Anyway, I think the speaker probably thought that there was a decent chance of peeling off enough votes to secure a majority for that maneuver last night, but there were the holdouts held out. So they just basically suspended things, scrapped it. I think they went back to the drawing board more or less at the Rules Committee, except they just made small tweaks, and we'll see what they come back with today. The plan is to come back to the floor with the rule once again. They didn't hold the vote, I guess, or maybe they may have possibly could have lost the vote. We'll have to look and see whether they even held a vote, just to be up to speed on exactly what the procedure was. And at any rate, it kept the House in session at least past midnight Eastern time, after which point I kind of stopped looking and hoped that Joan McCarter's ability to stay up at least 2 hours later because she was on Mountain Time might help straighten that out. But I had no idea how late they were going to go and how late it would be for Joan when they finally gave up. So we'll find out a little bit more about that today, I'm sure. We'll get a little bit of an update. I'll read the tweets of people who watched late into the evening. And then, we've got a million other things to launch into. For instance, there was, of course, Bill's morning tweet, which announced the fact that I think we've probably illustrated pretty well at this point. The Kagro in the morning radio show is live now. It's true. I guess there's always a possibility this could have been pre-taped, but it would have been quite an engineering feat to get all of that done and still be relevant to the morning's news. What's up today, Kagro X? Me, David Waldman, says a highlight of today's show is the fact that there is no video here, so of course you won't have to watch the footage of Rudy Giuliani shaving in a restaurant. Yeah, that was circulated this morning. I found that pretty much disgusting, as I think that was the intention, everybody to see it that way. I actually think I've seen him do that on video before. He holds court at restaurants. I guess during the Trump administration, the restaurant was frequently one in Washington, D.C. area. And I guess I'm sure he's back in his base of operations in New York. And he likes to hold court. I don't know. I mean, I guess it's old school style. Like he's got a regular table somewhere and they hold it for him. He finds a restaurant that is interested in having him in it every day. And that will instruct the staff to say, "Oh, hello, Mr. Giuliani. How are you today, Mr. Giuliani? Your regular table today, Mr. Giuliani? The regular today? I've set up with the, whatever the hell it is, and your coffee's already on the table, Mr. Giuliani. Come and sit down, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Giuliani." So I think he loves that. And I don't know. I guess he's also one of those old school guys that is like, oh, if you're up and working, at 6 a.m., then you're going to be successful at whatever you do because reasons. I don't really know, what the reasons are. I've never really figured that out. But, I think he's moving a little slower these days in general. And he's taking care of a lot more of his personal grooming problems in public. We saw his hair dye run out of his hair one day when he was flop sweating through a post-election press conference. Of course, there was the infamous Four Seasons landscaping press conference, which is really one of the highlights of his career all time. And then I guess here, I got to be there first thing in the morning. So the movers and shakers who come to this, crap hole restaurant, whatever it is, and I'm sure it might be a perfectly fine restaurant. For all I know, it's the, breakfast at the Four Seasons, but the hotel, not the landscaping. And but I guess he gets there on time, whatever, by neglecting to shave. And he brings an electric razor with him. And I'm sure he thinks, well, I'm just tidying up, so that I look neat and presentable. But it's a restaurant, Rudy Giuliani's cast off hair and skin cells just flying all over the restaurant. But I mean, whatever. He doesn't believe in science and yada yada, and he can't see it landing in everybody else's eggs and coffee. So therefore, it doesn't exist. Neither do germs. I'm not going to wear a mask. I'm not going to practice any sort of hygiene at all, except my own personal hygiene here at the table. And what are you going to do? It's pretty disgusting. And like I said, I think I've seen him do it before. He's likely shaken up a little because I did see some information yesterday indicating that I guess they're still his clients, Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman. I guess Fruman is pleading guilty to charges that he had previously planned to plead not guilty to. And so I guess that's changing things. And people are very interested in what that might mean and what sort of information he might spill at some point. But, I'm pretty sure I had seen a write-up of it on CNN, but I guess it didn't end up getting parked in my in Pocket here for some reason. But maybe it wasn't CNN. But someone has written something up. But I did see a couple of tweets on it last night, and so I haven't seen any extensive analysis yet of what the hell that's supposed to mean and exactly what beans people think he may spill. I mean, I think we got a pretty good understanding of what he and Parnas were about initially, and then later on when they appeared to sort of flip when they realized they were going to be abandoned, I think, by the Trump camp. Still no indication really about whether they're at heart good guys or bad guys. I think the default setting here is they're still bad guys. They're just doing themselves a favor, trying to get themselves off the hook, and doing it by selling out some other bad guys. And I guess we can be excited about that, but I don't think I'm ready to make the mistake of mistaking them for good people in all of this. Meanwhile, let's see. Other news, the continuing evacuations in Afghanistan, still not really, somehow registering with, certainly not with conservatives and certainly not with the more conservative cable news outlets, but they're evacuating people by the thousands every day. And as Greg has pointed out, and many others have pointed out in the media, there were no evacuations going on during the Trump administration portion of the wind down of Afghanistan. They just left all that work to be done by the next president, I guess. But once it became clear that Trump was committing to a withdrawal from Afghanistan, it would be very difficult, if not impossible, to reverse. They probably should have been thinking about what to do with all of the people in Afghanistan who would want to get out eventually. And, well, nobody did, or at least nobody thought about it in a way that would actually facilitate their leaving. As we heard from Greg yesterday, Stephen Miller actually went about sabotaging all of the governmental machinery that might have made it possible for people to be evacuated in the future. Not only did they ignore the fact that people needed to be evacuated beginning then, they were going to make it impossible for anybody else to evacuate anybody, because the people who would want to evacuate have brownish skin, and therefore Stephen Miller says they are undesirable in the United States of America. And despite the fact that they helped us conduct this war, they should stay there and die in it. It was basically his position. And so the whole thing had to be started up from scratch. And then it went from scratch and 0 people being evacuated to 10,000 people a day being evacuated. And incredible numbers being posted. But they've already committed to the evacuation was bungled meme here. So that's the theme they're going to stick with, as Greg told you. They already have the footage of the chaos, so they're just going to keep running that over and over again. All right. Well, that's too bad. But at least something's happening. And, some media is reporting it. Some mainstream traditional media is reporting it. It's just not the dominant theme yet. But we only know that it's happening because there are people there, in the actual traditional media roles actually reporting it. And we're thankful that they are doing that. Other bits and pieces of news that we'll have to run through. I do have, in fact, a roll call write-up of what's going on in the House. And we'll want to read through that before Joan comes around. Just so that, I don't know. I'll see if she says she wants to kind of go over those basics. Is that what she wants to discuss today? Or whether she wants to discuss something else, then I'll clear the basics out of the way so that we all are on the same page. And she can take us elsewhere if that's what she's thinking of. I, for the moment, will take you elsewhere, out to Arizona, where the stupid, frauded, sham election audit report thingy, whatever, is supposed to be, I think, the cyber ninjas are supposed to be filing their report with the Arizona State Senate, like now, sometime around now. Today, tomorrow, yesterday, I don't know what the date was. We can read about it in this article I grabbed over at CNN, but I saw lots of tweets about this the other night. The only way this whole thing could get more stupid and topical, really, would be for the whole Cyber Ninjas operation to shut down because everybody catches COVID. Well, guess what happened? Yes, so CNN, among others, reporting Arizona's sham election, quote, audit report delayed after Cyber Ninja's CEO and others test positive for COVID-19. And how could they not, right? Well, at this juncture, I share with you the CNN article written by Eric Bradner and Stephanie Becker. And here's what they've got. The report detailing the findings of contractors who conducted Arizona's sham, quote, audit of last year's election results. And I must say I like the idea of CNN starting their article this way and putting in the headline that it's a sham audit and closing the word audit in quotes, etc. The findings had been expected Monday, and they will be late. That's because they go on to explain why, but it's because it's Tuesday now. So they're late because they had been expected Monday. But they'll be late because 3 of the 5 members of the auditing team have tested positive for coronavirus, the state's Republican Senate leader says. Cyber Ninja's chief executive officer, Doug Logan, whose firm was hired by the Republican-led Arizona Senate to audit the 2.1 million votes cast in Maricopa County in 2020's presidential race, and 2 other members of the 5-person audit team have tested positive, quote, and are quite sick, unquote. Senate President Karen Fann said in a statement. I think at this point it's probably worth noting that, again, the fraud is taking place in Arizona. Cyber Ninjas, I believe, is Florida-based, so I think they're mandated by law to catch COVID. And very helpfully for us procedure nuts, 60 votes, that is 3/5 of the Cyber Ninjas audit team has caught the coronavirus. So I don't know what that means exactly. I was going to say, well, it's a successful filibuster of the audit report, but ordinarily you would really only have to have 2 of the members. Well, I guess you really do need to get 3 because they'd be able to vote 60-40 for cloture the other way. But so there you have it. They're filibustering the report. This stretches things out even longer, of course. And, it's just, of course, the Cyber Ninjas auditors would be unvaccinated. Naturally, that had to be the case. And they should have been looking for ivermectin in those ballots instead of bamboo fibers. Maybe that would have helped them, but that's kind of where they are. And the fact that they're quite sick is kind of interesting, too. It's not like it's just the flu or I'll be asymptomatic. So they really got the whole thing there. By the way, it's, I think, exceptionally ironic that they're auditing the vote because of the claims of fraud. And there were going to be claims of fraud regardless. There was no basis in reality for the claims of fraud, but the claims that they made up were bolstered, I think, among their base by the fact that there was so much mail-in voting and drop box voting, etc., because, of course, of the COVID-19 pandemic, where they were trying to, limit the exposure of everybody out there and limit the chances for transmission of the virus in the community. That would have been presented had most of America voted in the traditional manner, gathering at polling places, standing in line, etc., standing together in close proximity indoors for extended periods of time, etc., etc. And all of the concessions that they made to the virus, allowing people to vote by mail or cast their ballots in one way or another by voting at home in isolation and then mailing or otherwise delivering their ballots to the authorities. Oh my gosh, we can't have that. Rife with fraud, something. Then the fraud comes around and they check everything and, I'm not saying it's a message from God or anything, but they all got the virus too and they're pretty sick. Just thought that was kind of interesting. All right, so where were we with this? Right, they're quite sick, according to Senate President Karen Fann. The whole thing's quite sick, if you ask me. Logan and other members of his team were often seen during the recount process without masks because they didn't believe in it. They did believe in fraud, couldn't find that. They didn't believe in the virus, found that. So put that in your report. It's not clear whether those who tested positive had been vaccinated. I guess it's possible they're breakthrough infections, but come on, it's cyber ninjas. CNN reached out to cyber ninjas requesting comment. Elections experts in both parties have said for months that the result of the, quote, audit pushed for by Republican lawmakers and conducted by the Florida-based company, we're correct, which had no experience auditing election results and no experience, by the way, avoiding pandemics, and whose chief executive, Logan, has repeated wild conspiracy theories about election fraud, will not be credible. Fan said senators are receiving, quote, a portion of the draft report Monday, but did not detail which portion. It's the cover page. And what will be left out. Everything else. Fan also said senators want the envelopes that contained ballots mailed in last year included in the final report, but got the images of those envelopes from Maricopa County too late. Oh no, they're not going to have the envelopes. I mean, the envelopes don't contain any information, but they like to imagine that they will. And although they can't point to what that information might be, the fact that they don't have it is just an excuse to say, well, you know, of course they didn't find the fraud. The fraud's in the envelopes, and we don't have the envelopes. And they'll get the envelopes, and they'll say, the fraud's been removed from the envelopes. Outrageous, more fraud. You know how that's going to go. In addition to the illnesses, it wasn't until Thursday that the Senate received the images of the ballot envelopes from Maricopa County and are hoping to have those analyzed as soon as possible to incorporate those results into the final report. I don't know what they're analyzing. I guess they're talking about 1 million or so. I don't know how many ballots that came in envelopes. There's nothing to find, but they just got them. They've been working on this thing for like 6 months, but they just got them because Maricopa County is so mean to us and whatever. So now we can't give you the final report. The Senate legal team will meet Wednesday, tomorrow, to start reviewing the draft report, but how can they without pictures of envelopes? And when the remainder of the draft is submitted, the Senate team will hold another meeting to continue checking for accuracy, clarity, and proof of documentation of findings. Once that is complete, the final report will be presented to the Senate Judiciary Committee and findings released to the public. Last week, Maricopa County officials said they'd already sent the images to the Cyber Ninjas review team in the past and were simply resending them. I can't find them in my email. Can you resend? Thanks. Randy Pullen, a spokesman for the Senate-sponsored audit, told CNN that the ballot images would not be handled by cyber ninjas. So who the F is going to... All right. Why is their report delayed if they're not handling the images? I don't know. The report was due to the Senate, but it could be weeks or months before its results are revealed to the public. Fan and a team selected by Senate Republicans planned to review the report. Ken Bennett, the Senate's liaison with the audit team, who got locked out of the ballot review center, I don't know what they were calling it. Remember him? He said last week that a group, will spend the following days or weeks verifying the report and, quote, checking for accuracy. I don't know what the hell they think they're really doing, but whatever. Bennett said he wanted to, quote, spread fact, not rumor, that this would only be a draft report and it would not be made public. The Senate team could ask Cyber Ninjas for further clarifications of its findings. Senate team will then review for accuracy and clarity for final report, which will be released publicly, Fan, a Republican, tweeted last week. Hence the incomplete syntax. Bennett told CNN on Monday that he expects there to be an adjustment to how the meeting will be conducted on Wednesday. Wow. All right. When the Senate's legal team will review the partial draft report. He did not know the specifics or whether Logan may brief the Senate's legal team via video conference or phone instead of in person. Once the audit team delivers the full draft report, Bennett expects the review process to take, quote, several weeks before the report is made public. And guess what? It says here that in the next section, the audit has been plagued by problems. I can't believe it. The company and its volunteers and subcontractors did not follow standard auditing procedures. Observers from Democratic Secretary of State Katie Hobbs's office have repeatedly noted instances in which those conducting the audit have broken their own rules. And the partisan nature of the audit and its funders, $5.7 million, came from outside conservative sources compared with just $150,000 from the state Senate, which ordered the audit, has long cast serious doubt on its credibility. No matter the results of the audit, the reality that Joe Biden is president and won Arizona's 11 electoral votes last year will not change. But that hasn't stopped former President Donald Trump and his allies, particularly far-right pro-Trump propaganda outlets, from claiming otherwise and saying that other states should follow Arizona's lead in conducting audits. Trump issued a raft of false statements ahead of a campaign-style rally in the state last month and used the rally to repeat those lies. At least they're pretty upfront about the language. Does everybody understand here that the 2020 election was a total disgrace? Trump said, and that's because it included Donald Trump. Anyway, Trump's allies have tried to export Arizona's audit to other states, including Pennsylvania, where a state senator has sought to conduct his own review of individual counties' results, but has been rebuffed by those counties. And Wisconsin, where Republican lawmakers are looking into several approaches, but have butted heads over which avenues to pursue. So there you have it, everybody. Dems in disarray. Next up are warnings about unreliable conclusions. And I think that's actually the last section of the piece. We won't have a chance to cram it in just before the break, but perhaps just after. And I have seen some other reporting on that too. People are beginning and using the delay wisely to start setting expectations, but the expectations in this case being set by normal people who know not to expect anything normal to come, or useful for that matter, to come out of this audit. All right, we're a little late with the music, so we'll cut things off and be back in 2 minutes after this.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. Okay, screwed up with the music a little bit, but then I forgot. Oh, I'm used to the same part, being the cue to wake up and come back from the break, except that played a few seconds later than usual. Anyway, yes, there are problems and warnings about unreliable conclusions. Maybe this is the piece that I thought I was putting away earlier. Anyway, so we'll get to this. This may be all we really need to know about it. The finalization of the audit and the potential for the report detailing its results to soon become public has led Republican and Democratic elections officials in Arizona, both, including GOP officials in Maricopa County, to warn that it should not be taken seriously. I mean, I think that's about as bluntly as it could be put. But, we'll take it seriously anyway. What the hell? Hobbs, the Arizona Secretary of State and a 2022 Democratic candidate for governor, issued a 46-page report pre-butting, like rebutting, but pre-butting, the audit's results too. It is clear that any outcomes, and that's in quotes, quote, outcomes or quote, conclusions that are reported from the Senate's review by the cyber ninjas or any of their subcontractors or partners are unreliable, Hobbs reports says. The report calls the Senate-run recount secretive and disorganized. It reiterates most of the issues Hobbs has cited for months: lack of security, shifting processes for screening and counting ballots, chain of custody, and transparency problems. Over and over, the report notes there were no consistent procedures in reading, tallying, and storing the ballots. One person working to examine the paper in the ballots complained that the process changed every day, with an exclamation point. So, you know they're serious. In one example, which is a second example, because the previous note was, I think, an example, but in another example, a Senate contractor told observers that after 1 week, scanning of the paper ballots, quote, had been abandoned because contractors performed a software update which resulted in the loss of all the ballot images. Aha. It's a good update. At least we know it's a legitimate software company because the update ruined everything. That's how you know they're a major player in the software game. Stephen Richer, the Maricopa County Recorder, a Republican whose 2020 victory was one of the GOP's few gains in the state. Audit that right now. As they lost the presidential race and the Senate seat, released a 38-page letter titled Dear Arizona Republicans last week. In the letter, Richer, who has become an outspoken critic of the Cyber Ninjas audit, details his own political history as a loyal Republican who voted for Trump and explains the missteps the auditors and Senate Republicans who hired them have taken that led him to respond forcefully, including disproven allegations of criminal wrongdoing posted in a Twitter account run by the audit team. Richer notes that 3 post-election partial audits of Maricopa County's results found them to be accurate. He also said he would still be willing to conduct a review of the 2020 election to ease Republicans' worries. Oh, great. And would do so with fan and GOP lawmakers if they ditched Cyber Ninjas. That's a great plan. Get rid of Cyber Ninjas, then start the whole thing over again. Well, you see, they did it wrong. We have to do it right now from the start. But, remember that anything that even a legitimate auditing operation could do at this point would be illegitimate because Cyber Ninjas has basically tampered with and spoiled all the ballots at this point, if I understand things correctly. Anyway, he goes on to say, what I'm not willing to do is further indulge the biased, inexperienced, incompetent, conspiracy theory-driven, unscrupulous, partisan Cyber Ninjas, Richer said. He wrote that the audit, quote, is an abomination that has so far eroded election confidence, or I guess, yes, all right. Trying to find out how the stress should be on that so. That either it has so far eroded election confidence that something happens? No, it is so far, just as we said. An abomination that has so far eroded election confidence and defamed good people. Too bad, because it sounded like it was going to be an interesting sentence and some good writing at the end, but why bother with any of that? Just be an idiot. So, all right, he condemns the audit. We'll take it and move on with the rest of these things. Yes, here we are. The Washington Post had another piece here, which I think was tweeted around yesterday with the announcement that actual elections officials in Arizona from both sides were trashing the audit process. The Cybersecurity 202, this is the Washington Post, and Greg always reminds you 202 is the area code down there. So this is Joseph Marks for the, I don't know, did they spin this off from the regular 202, the Cybersecurity 202? Elections officials are tearing into the Maricopa County audit. He's joined here by Aaron Schaffer, writing that election administrators from both parties are making their case that the audit of the 2020 election results in Maricopa County, Arizona was partisan and ham-handed even before it's released. They're hoping to halt the momentum for efforts at similar audits in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and elsewhere. Good idea. The report from the Maricopa audit was supposed to be delivered yesterday, with so much we've learned. Parts of it were delayed, however, because 3 members have COVID. Let's see, anything new in here? It was the CEO is one of them. It's the latest in the string of delays for the audit, which was initially supposed to be completed in May. Rosalind S. Helderman reports for the Washington Post. It was a shocking but not out of character turn for the audit. The controversial audit has been marked by cybersecurity bungles, a lack of adherence to basic auditing principles, and myriad other self-inflicted wounds. As a Republican and an election administrator, I worry about our country and I worry about the future of my party, says Trey Grayson, a former Republican Secretary of State from Kentucky, in a call with reporters. I don't want bad ideas like this spreading to other states. Too late. Democratic and Republican officials alike who run elections are almost entirely united in opposing Maricopa-style audits. The audit was run by partisans and lacks the rigors of conventional election reviews. Secretary of State Katie Hobbs released her rebuttal, as we noted in the other piece. Let's see. And notes for the record that they ignored basic cyber and physical security procedures, such as limiting access to voting machines, ballots, and tallying data. That means there were effectively no checks preventing people helping to conduct the audit from falsifying results. That's one of the big problems with this thing. Their so-called audit findings are not worth the paper they're printed on, Hobbs said in the press call. And guess what? They haven't even, for the most part, been printed yet. Not to mention, hey, what's in that paper? As though that meant anything. All right, let's see. There's Stephen Richer in his 38-page letter. He accused the auditors of being wildly incompetent or intentionally damaging voter confidence. Different part of the letter being quoted there, but he had 38 pages to choose from. The National Association of Secretaries of State, which represents top state elections officials regardless of party, voted nearly unanimously last week to approve a slate of recommendations for post-election audits that directly contradicts what happened in Arizona. Recommendations include being fully transparent about auditing procedures and laying out those procedures before an election. The House Oversight Committee has battled with Logan over the audit's lack of transparency. Democratic leaders of the committee demanded Cyber Ninjas produce any communications it had with Trump and details about its financing by Friday. But guess what? They're not going to make the deadline because they all have COVID. You get that? The whole store has COVID. But there's still strong support for such audits among some Republican lawmakers in swing state legislatures because they're so very dumb. In Arizona, Fan and other GOP legislative leaders have butted heads with Maricopa County's GOP-led Board of Supervisors, which roundly opposed the Cyber Ninjas audit. In Wisconsin, Representative Janelle Brandtjen, it's Janel, Brand, Brand, Tjen, Brandtjen, a Republican, leader of the state assembly's Elections Committee, issued subpoenas to two of the state's largest counties, Milwaukee and Brown, demanding that they turn over their voting machines to the legislature for a Maricopa-style review. Voting machines, great. That's a great idea. Wisconsin Assembly Speaker Robin Vos has not yet signed those subpoenas, which would give them the force of law, and has said Brandtjen is misinformed about the state's auditing process. So, major duh on that front. And interesting. It would be funny to just see the subpoenas die there for lack of a signature. Vos has faced criticism from Trump, of course, in the past over his auditing positions, but he met with Trump over the weekend to provide, quote, details about our robust efforts in Wisconsin to restore full integrity and trust in elections, the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel reported. What else have we got here? The keys. A hacker has completed returning $600 million in stolen cryptocurrency. What's that about? That's about something completely different. I see. That's right. We're in the Cybersecurity 202, which means you can cram 800 different stories under the same headline and not tell anybody. Okay, because most people aren't just reading these things live on the air, so it doesn't matter. All right, that's about something completely different, and that's cool. Somebody completed returning stolen cryptocurrency, although I don't know how concerned I get about stolen cryptocurrency. Whatever. All right. Well, I think that brings us up to date on the fake audit that's going on there. And it might, I think, make sense at this point to check in on the roll call article that I put aside about what went on yesterday with the House situation. And even if it's something that Joan does want to discuss, maybe I ought to be briefed for the discussion too, don't you think? Let's take care of that now. House leaders scrap plans for budget vote. Will try again later, Tuesday. That's today. Centrist Democrats, as they put it, want assurances that infrastructure legislation will be taken up regardless of larger budget bill. So what? I want a free pepperoni pizza, and, we can't always get what we want. Lindsay McPherson writes this for roll call. House Democrats early Tuesday punted a scheduled vote on a rule for floor debate that would deem, that in quotes, but deem the fiscal 2022 budget resolution as having been adopted in that chamber after hours of talks with moderate holdouts didn't yield agreement. The rule vote was originally expected Monday, but negotiations stretched into early Tuesday before Majority Leader Steny Hoyer's office sent a notice informing lawmakers that no further votes were planned that legislative day and that the chamber would reconvene again at noon on Tuesday. And now that they'll end the legislative day, it is in fact Tuesday. Debate on the rule, which in addition to deeming the budget adopted, would set parameters for floor debate on Senate-passed infrastructure legislation and a voting rights bill, the John Lewis bill, was still on Tuesday's floor schedule for the time being. Speaker Nancy Pelosi left the Capitol after midnight on the phone with Hoyer, confirming the schedule update to reporters. We will come back tomorrow and we will take up the rule at 12 o'clock noon. Okay, that would be an hour after the show ends. Gives us time to get around to that. Let's see. So then the California Democrat, that's Pelosi, spoke back into her cell phone. Was I right, Steny? Pelosi said the House won't reconvene until noon because Democrats have a caucus meeting scheduled for 9 a.m. That'd be going on now. And then a classified briefing on Afghanistan for all House members at 10:30 a.m. A group of 9 moderates, which grew to 10 on Monday, has said they won't vote for the budget without leadership bringing the infrastructure measure up for a vote first. A potential compromise could involve setting a date certain for the infrastructure vote, but Pelosi declined to say whether that was the accommodation under discussion. Some of the tweets I've seen this morning from reporters covering the situation indicate that that is likely the next concession, to give a date certain for an infrastructure vote. We'll see tomorrow, won't we now, she said. I guess she was getting tired at that point. Pelosi also declined to say whether the rule, which the Rules Committee reported to the floor Monday evening, would need to be amended. Rules Committee Chairman Jim McGovern hinted at that possibility as he left Pelosi's office just before 11 p.m. Monday. There's some additional language we're looking at, but in the scheme of things, it's not that big of a deal, the Massachusetts Democrat said. Pelosi had been negotiating both in person and on the phone with the moderate holdouts. After one of the in-person discussions broke shortly after 9 p.m. Monday, the moderates declined to say anything about their latest demands, but remained hopeful a deal could be reached. We're still working, feeling very optimistic, though still working, said Representative Josh Gottheimer, who has been leading the moderate group's efforts. The plan to simply deem the budget's adoption as part of the rule emerged Monday after it became clear the holdouts wouldn't vote for the underlying budget resolution separately before the Senate-passed bipartisan infrastructure bill received a vote. As part of that offer, Democratic leaders pledged to bring the infrastructure legislation to the floor by October 1st. And just in case people aren't quite getting what's what the maneuver was there, if the moderates were holding out, and they're not moderates, but okay. If the conservative Democrats, centrists, I don't know, moderates, I don't know what else you want to call them, the AV club, I don't know. Anyway, these guys were saying, well, we're not going to vote for the budget resolution, which is necessary. You got to adopt the budget resolution in order to put reconciliation in motion. And all the progressives, against whom we've arrayed ourselves in this, they all want very badly to see a reconciliation bill brought to the floor so that without the threat of a Senate filibuster, we can, adopt all of these very important spending priorities. It's like a legitimate play and everything. It's nothing weird about it, but they want to see that happen. And so the moderates, or whatever you want to call them, thought they would leverage that and say, well, for whatever reason, we want the infrastructure bill passed first so that we can go back and say, we did this great bipartisan compromise, et cetera, et cetera. And so come and thank us for it. And for whatever reason, they thought somehow that I guess it's the competing demands and the competing insistences. Progressives, I'm not really sure why it started happening, but I guess they just didn't really trust the moderate group, even though they're a very small group. But they didn't trust them to show up to vote for reconciliation. They thought that they would start claiming that reconciliation, the process of reconciliation, the way they bypassed the filibuster was somehow controversial and wrong, and or that they would balk at the size of the spending package involved in the, written into the reconciliation bill or something like that, that they would balk and cause the reconciliation bill to fail, even though it wouldn't be subject to a filibuster, which would be very embarrassing. So they insisted, well, okay, what the moderate types who might think it was really cool and independent looking to insist on blocking the use of reconciliation, what they really want is in that infrastructure package. So we'll just say, all right, well, we will prevent the passage of the infrastructure package until they agree to allow us to move a reconciliation bill, or even until they approve the thing, right? And I don't know who went first, but the counter to that was for this other smaller, more conservative group to say, well, we won't allow a budget resolution to pass until the infrastructure bill is signed into law. We want that achievement as a guarantee for our cooperation, which we're not actually even promising, on reconciliation. So the leadership's response to all this, so we've got two competing efforts at what has to get voted on first. They said, all right, they came up with a rule, said, all right, well, we're definitely going to need a rule for consideration of the infrastructure bill. We definitely need a rule, of course, for the consideration of the voting rights bill. And, of course, we need to have a budget resolution adopted that has reconciliation instructions in it in order for us to start on reconciliation. Ordinarily, they'd probably take their time about it and handle this budget separately. But I guess time being of the essence and everybody having their various deadlines, and I guess the infrastructure bill's effective date is October 1st, I guess the beginning of the fiscal year. So I guess they figured, all right, well, if you want to have the timing be at least close on these two things, you're going to have to pass a budget resolution very quickly, especially if you really think that there's going to be a reconciliation bill considered at or near the same time as the infrastructure bill either passes or becomes effective, October 1st. That's not a lot of time. So one of the things you can do is bypass the whole, very complicated budget writing, budget resolution writing procedure for the time being, and pass a shell budget, essentially, that has very little, if anything, in it except for the reconciliation instructions, and pass it right away. The way to get past the, interestingly enough, get past the impasse, which is designed to stop things from passing, as between which one goes first, is to say, all right, well, what if the rule for the consideration of the infrastructure bill and other things, which is absolutely, it's necessary to have a rule in place in order for us to take up the bill. I mean, technically it really isn't, but for practical purposes, it is. What if we throw in there that, oh, by the way, one of the other things that this resolution does, in addition to telling us how many hours can we debate the infrastructure bill for, it also says one of the consequences of adopting this rule is that it also deems the budget to have been voted on and passed. And that's effective. That's a thing that they can do and that they've done in the past. Not always with the budget, but sometimes with other bills, etc. But if it still has to be voted on in order to pass. So it's not like you are passing legislation without a vote. It's just a compound vote. So they said, all right, well, we can't decide which one is going to go first. How about if they both go at the same time? Which, by the way, is, I think kids on the playground would probably recognize that as a pretty fair thing. Well, I want to go first. Well, I want to go first. Well, how about if we both go at the same time? Ready? 1, 2, 3. And that's generally considered a workable solution. So that was offered, and the very mature, totally very serious problem solvers caucus said no to that. So I guess you can take that for what it's worth. I mean, to me, that says you're not really problem solvers, are you? I mean, kids on the playground understand that this is the solution, but they still said no. And why? And the answer is because they figured they still have leverage anyway. As long as they've got enough people in their group to block the passage of anything in particular, then they'll just do that. Because there's really no downside to it for them, with the possible exception of it taking longer to approve the infrastructure bill. I guess the deal was when Pelosi floated, or the leadership team floated this possibility. I mean, it's a nice compromise, but I think what they looked at and said was, well, there's really nothing that Pelosi can do to stop the infrastructure bill at this point. I mean, she could, in fact, not bring it to the floor, but the fact that a bipartisan plan was worked out, and Democrats do want that bill passed. Even progressives do want that bill passed. They want those projects done, and they want that money spent, but they also want more things besides that. So the idea that she would just single-handedly kill the bill on behalf of, I guess on behalf of the progressives, saying, well, we'll only, they were the ones threatening to say we would block the infrastructure bill unless we get our reconciliation bill locked and done. I mean, the threat was that they were willing to do that. The question is, how credible is that threat? And it might be credible, it might not be credible, but the next question now becomes, how credible is that threat in Pelosi's hands? And I don't know how credible it really is, especially if they went a different route, which is something I guess we can discuss after the break, because there's another break coming up, using a slightly different tactic to shift the timeline, which, I don't know, can we even fit that whole thing? I guess I'll read you Greg Sargent's article about it to give you all of the various details about it. But there was another method by which they proposed shifting the timeline and having their vote yesterday, but then, and perhaps bringing the infrastructure bill to the floor right away, which would appear to be a nod, at least technically, in the direction of the conservative / moderate group demanding that bill go first. But they were going to play around with the post-passage handling of the bill such that it wasn't delivered to the president for his signature until after the reconciliation bill was passed. And can you do that? Yes. And now I guess I've ruined the next segment. But basically, I've given you the general outlines of it. But we'll discuss the details of it. I think I do have, I guess I better double check, that I do have Greg Sargent's piece from, yes, there we are, how Pelosi can give the rebels a way out of the hostage crisis they created. and he speaks, I guess, with Sarah Binder about this and discusses this possibility, although that wasn't the option they went with. I don't think that there's a functional difference in terms of what the conservative group was likely to do in response to either this one plan of allowing a vote, but then holding back the infrastructure bill from the president's desk versus deeming the budget resolution passed in yesterday's rule. Neither one of them changes the calculus, which I think ultimately was just that the conservatives could say, well, aside from the fact that they wanted the bill signed with all possible speed, they could just sit on their hands and say, well, you know, you've passed the infrastructure bill and you say you're going to hold on to it and not send it to the president. But I know that you want this thing signed. And I know that I don't think that Nancy Pelosi would say, well, the Senate has passed this thing. The House has passed this thing. And I waited and waited and waited. And for us to finish with reconciliation, and we haven't. And so therefore, I'm just never going to send it. I mean, the Constitution's language about it is that the Speaker of the House shall sign all legislation passed by the House and prepare it for presentation either to the other body for their vote or to the president, depending on what stage of the game you're in. And it's certainly not clear that there's a date certain by which she would have to do it, but I think the assumption is that it's something she would have to do prior to the end of the current Congress. I don't think she can. I mean, she can't exercise a veto over the bill by refusing to pass it on to the president. Although, then again, I mean, if this was Donald Trump as Speaker, and remember, Matt Gaetz, the child molester guy, is floating Trump as Speaker of the House. There's nothing that says what happens if the Speaker doesn't sign it and instead crumples it up and eats the paper, as Donald Trump is sometimes wont to do, right? Yeah, so I guess they could test that. All right, back we are now as I used the break to tap something out. I just happened to glance over at what was going on Twitter. And more of the same, people resisting the vaccine and saying, I'm not going to take it, you can't tell me what to do, I'm not a sheep. And then proceed, it's just more of the same, like, I'm not a sheep, and then proceeds to eat sheep medicine because they won't get the vaccine. I think that's incredible that they choose that that metaphor. I'm not a sheep. I'm just going to medicate myself as though I were one and eat this ivermectin that I bought at the feed store. It's just kind of astounding. All right. I mentioned to you that there was this Plumline piece. Let's read it so that the thoughts on it are organized and the whole thing is explained in a way that, I don't know, I feel more guaranteed that you get a fuller explanation, better than what I could cram in the last 2 minutes of the segment. The piece, How Pelosi Can Give the Rebels a Way Out of the Hostage Crisis They Created. It's a possibility. She didn't end up giving them this, but it's worth reminding everybody that this is a thing. Paul Waldman and Greg Sargent together on this piece. What happens when the Democratic Party desperately wants to pass 2 significant spending bills, but the party's margin in the House is so small that even 9 conservative Democrats can hold the whole project hostage? We're finding out right now, as a group led by Representative Josh Gottheimer of New Jersey is trying to use its leverage to force an immediate vote on the bipartisan infrastructure plan already passed by the Senate. They are threatening to vote against moving the process forward on the much larger $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill, the first step toward eventual passage of that bill, to compel immediate passage of the infrastructure measure. It turns out there may be a way out of the jam. There were several. But they rejected them. One that involves giving the conservative Democrats a concession on timing while preserving the 2-track strategy. This is the one that Greg Sargent preferred. And it goes like this. The trouble right now is that other Democrats don't trust the conservative Democrats or moderates in the Senate to stay on board with the reconciliation bill, which includes extensive measures building human infrastructure and addressing climate change. That's true. And even if they win over all of the 9 in the House, there's still Kyrsten Sinema, maybe Joe Manchin, and who knows who else could emerge from among Senate Democrats to say, well, I'm not voting for the reconciliation bill. And it's a good bet that Sinema might do something like that because, no one knows where her head is at this point. So you just want to, that's the reason for progressives and others in the House saying, look, we're happy to pass both. We just think you're not. And we want you to be. And if you agree to pass both, we'll agree to pass both. If you only want one to pass, well, we'll deny you the one. And at the bottom, I guess the real question is, how solid would progressives be if they had their bluff called? Would they really vote against the bipartisan infrastructure bill? And although they probably want those projects started, there is a possibility that they would vote against it because they would say it's just incomplete. It's too small. But is it better than nothing is the ultimate question. And I don't know how many of the 90 plus members of the Progressive Caucus that they count would agree that it truly was better to do nothing than this one something. That's frequently the case and frequently the problem with it. I mean, the Progressive Caucus has traditionally had numbers much greater than any other faction of the Democratic Caucus. And it's hard to believe because they hardly ever win versus the Blue Dogs, New Democrats, or Problem Solvers Caucus, or whatever other alternative caucus approach you might care to name. And that's because they really don't plan things out like that and hang together that way. They sometimes announce that position, and I don't know whether they just don't think that so many of them would be peeled off every time. I mean, they have a group of 95. They figure we can afford to lose, 7/8 of the group and still be effective when the margins are this close. And maybe that's the reason they don't actually whip the question and then, actually try to make people commit to that position from the beginning and then see it all the way through. And then because that effort wasn't made because they figure they can lose so many and still win, it turns out that they really have no idea how many people will abandon them at the last minute. And, and again, the question then becomes, well, look, the reconciliation thing isn't happening. Kyrsten Sinema is just unmovable. And Manchin is right there with her, and it can't be done. And so then the question becomes at the last minute, well, are you also going to say no infrastructure projects? And generally speaking, progressives, for the most part, I mean, it's sad that they can't hold those positions and stick to their guns, but progressives are progressives. And they do say, well, it is awfully dumb to not do either of these things. I guess we ought to do this thing. And, it's the position of the moderates and conservatives to just bet on that unwillingness to do nothing. And it's a pretty good bet and has been for a long time because progressives care about getting things done. So it's tough. They're in a hard spot there. All right. Where were we here? Listening to Greg Sargent and Paul Waldman writing this thing about the problem being that other Democrats don't trust the conservative Democrats to show up and pass the reconciliation bill. Thus was House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's two-track strategy devised. The House would only vote on the infrastructure bill after the Senate sends over the reconciliation bill. This locks both factions in together. Conservative and moderate Democrats must support the reconciliation bill in order to get the infrastructure bill passed. Progressives must support the infrastructure bill in order to get reconciliation bill passed. The conservative Democrats are badly misinterpreting the situation, however. In an interview with The Atlantic, Gottheimer laughably claimed House progressives are, quote, holding the president's priority hostage. This is nonsense. President Biden has endorsed the two-track strategy. He recently declared that he hopes House Democrats will eventually put two bills on my desk, one on infrastructure, one on reconciliation. And on Monday, a White House spokesman stressed that Biden wants both bills on his desk. While that's a bit vague, it does demonstrate that Biden actively wants the House to move the reconciliation process forward. So it's absurd for Gottheimer to pretend progressives are the one holding the process hostage. In reality, he and his rebels are doing that to gain lopsided leverage to downsize the spending and taxes in the reconciliation bill later. So, what happens now? The conservative Democrats may simply fold and vote to move the reconciliation bill forward. That hasn't happened so far. But it may also be necessary to give them a way to save face first. Several procedural experts point to a way to do that. They pointed to several ways. In fact, one of the ways was to deem the budget resolution passed in the rule for the infrastructure bill, but that didn't work out last night. But there's another one. The House could pass the infrastructure bill and move the reconciliation process forward, but Pelosi could effectively refrain from sending the infrastructure bill to the president until the Senate sends over a completed reconciliation bill. Sarah Binder, congressional expert at the Brookings Institution, tells us that the relevant House rule stipulates that the Speaker shall sign a bill. It's not the Constitution, rather, but the rules of the House, but it's understood from the Constitution, of course, that bills that pass both houses will be presented to the president for signature. But okay, the House rules stipulate that the Speaker shall sign a bill that has passed both chambers, as would be the case with the infrastructure bill, but doesn't specify when. Binder also points to a Congressional Research Service report stating that the Speaker may sign such bills, quote, at any time. That would mean the bill doesn't get sent to the president, which Pelosi could wait on until the Senate sends the reconciliation bill, Binder says. There does not appear to be any prohibition in House rules for such delay, Binder tells us. This can be looked at two ways. In one sense, it makes the conservatives' strategy appear more quixotic. Even if they did leverage the House into passing the infrastructure bill, Pelosi would still be able to preserve her two-track strategy. They may think they have Pelosi over a barrel, but they don't, congressional scholar Norman Ornstein told us. Anyway, I'm not entirely certain about that. I mean, I get the point. She can definitely wait. I mean, I think the point was amply illustrated with the first impeachment of Donald Trump. Not that that was anything that was bound for the president's desk, but it demonstrated the ability of the Speaker to hold off on transporting the paperwork on, pretty much anything. I mean, I guess you might say, well, that wasn't legislation, so it doesn't prove that it's the case for legislation. But on the other hand, you might say, well, it's an impeachment, and that's even more imperative. But she was able to hold on to that, so I would think that routine legislation would likewise be something she could slow down if necessary. And the answer is, yeah, sure, no problem. They can do that. She's probably used that tactic before. I don't know if I can point to an example where it was definitely used, but it was certainly contemplated, for instance, in the passage of the Affordable Care Act when they were first messing around with the idea of having to pass a reconciliation sidecar for it, and the Senate was insisting that the underlying bill had to be passed first, and that only then were you eligible to make the fixes to the underlying bill with reconciliation bill afterwards. That I still don't believe is actually the case. But this sort of thing has been going on for a long time, and also helps illustrate why the House frequently mistrusts the Senate, and specifically why conservatives or why progressives frequently mistrust conservative Democrats, whether in the Senate or in the House, and probably vice versa. They have, real experience in watching the other faction balk at the last minute and run away from things that looked like done deals. Anyway, back to the write-up here. Another way to look at this is that it gives Pelosi the option of passing the infrastructure bill in this fashion, that is to say, first, right away, and make Gottheimer happy, then holding it to give the conservative 9 a way to say that they, quote, won. They could say to their districts that they got the infrastructure bill passed and it's only a matter of time until the money flows, yet it would not be sent to the president until moderates backed the reconciliation bill. I guess the question is, would they go for it? And the answer turned out to be no. And I can understand why. I mean, it was always just a matter of time until the money flows. Yeah, but you can also view this thing from two different perspectives. The other being, suppose you pass the thing right away and send it to the president right away. The money still doesn't flow until October 1st. So, at the very least, you could say it doesn't change. If your argument is that the projects have to get started as soon as possible, and the answer is those projects can't start until October 1st, then it doesn't really matter very much whether the bill is passed sooner than October 1st. On the other hand, it also suggests to you that might be a deadline right there hanging out for you if you're looking for a date certain on things. If Pelosi were to come back and say, all right, well, I guarantee you that I will sign the bill and send it to the president, the infrastructure bill, on September 30th, no matter what happens. So, I mean, I guess you could go with that as a compromise, but I don't know. For whatever reason, the conservative group at the moment seems intent on saying, no, we want the headline now. And why would you? I mean, that's another thing, too. Like, there's probably no point in the congressional election cycles at which a headline is less effective than, like, right now, August, a year out from, the next election. People are paying the least attention possible to what's going on. And, of course, you're banking on a procedural issue becoming a huge win for you in the elections. And that's just never really been the case with anything ever. So, I don't know. Anyway, so, I think that kind of explains things a little bit. Anyway, a little bit more about the possibility of the speaker deciding to just hold on to the bill. This would seem to be a useful tool for Pelosi in negotiating with the conservative members of her caucus. Josh Chaffetz, the author of a good book about Congress, which is linked herein, told us they can claim to have won the concession of passing the bipartisan bill first. And they got wise to this right away, and so their demands for several days now have been couched in terms of the bill has to be signed into law by the president first before we begin on reconciliation. Anyway, Binder nonetheless says it's certainly a plausible pathway in procedural terms. And yet, adding another complexity, this might not work for another reason. Progressives might not vote for the infrastructure bill as part of this strategy because they won't trust that it will work in the end. They'd be right to think so, I think. The bottom line is that Pelosi might have to come up with some way of giving the conservative nine a face-saving exit. If she did, and it got the conservatives to drop their hostage-taking, they could then claim the Problem Solvers Caucus, which these conservatives belong to, actually solved a problem. Wouldn't that be refreshing? It would be. But, yeah, everybody still has reason to mistrust everybody else, even under this procedure. Like I said, if the deal is that they say, all right, well, we'll vote on the infrastructure bill first and pass it, but Pelosi will just hold it and not send it to the president, there's a point at which she can no longer do that. And that's the end of the current Congress. I mean, she can't keep a bill that's been passed by both houses on her desk and not present them to the president. Or at least, like I was saying before the break, that's the understanding about how things work. I don't think that there's anything anywhere that says what happens if a speaker, like I theorized, if you made Donald Trump the speaker and he took the bill and crumpled it up and chewed it up, literally chewed it up and ate it, as he's apparently done in the past. Not with bills, but not legislative bills anyway. I don't know what else he does it with, but this is something he's done. Again, then I guess you say, well, but and nobody knows exactly what to do, because I think probably when the founders, hammered out the Constitution and the rules and things, they just thought, well, look, if everybody knows it's been passed by both houses, the Speaker of the House is a responsible figure. He's not going to just sit there and try to hide the paper and say, it never happened. There is no such bill. Everybody knows. and they wouldn't stand for it, and they'd whatever. They'd throw him out of office. They'd impeach him, for instance, from office. But, I don't know that that's really the case, because, they probably also thought, well, we won't write anything in the Constitution about what happens if the current president, the sitting president of the United States, loses an election and foments a violent revolution instead to overthrow the government of the United States and reinstall himself as president, perhaps for life, by claiming that the election was fraudulently conducted. We don't have anything in there about that because, well, we kind of do already have something in there about that. You would obviously impeach such a president and bar him from public office forever after. But as it turns out, no, you wouldn't. I mean, you should, but you wouldn't. So, I don't know. But again, in the ordinary course of things, for Nancy Pelosi, who's not a lunatic by most accounts, she would, I think, eventually be forced at the very least, at the last moment in January 2nd or the early hours of January 3rd, 2023, after the 2022 elections and the end of this Congress, or just before the end of this Congress, end up having to just say, all right, I give up. I've had this bill on my desk and I can't not send it, so here it is. But presumably that would happen a lot earlier. I know that she's rumored to be retiring, or maybe it's more than a rumor. I brought this objection up to Armando yesterday, and he said, well, she's retiring, so she may not care about taking all the heat for this. But there's some question about how long she'd be willing to take that heat for. If they really passed the infrastructure bill, in other words, and she really sat on it, for how long could she sit on it before the pressure became overwhelming? And everybody said, Pelosi, we've seen the Senate pass this bill. We saw the House pass this bill. It's been 12 weeks. It's now past October. We could have been spending this money already. How long are you going to hold on to this thing? We're just not, everybody knows that it's you personally that's stopping this. There are projects that are not happening in my district because you personally haven't sent the bill to the president. And at some point that pressure just becomes overwhelming. And my guess is that pressure becomes overwhelming just before October 1st, when she begins to realize things are going to get delayed. I mean, she might be able to, she might be interested for whatever reason in service to the rest of the caucus, which wanted things to happen differently. She might be willing to take heat for a week, 2 weeks, I don't know, a month. But I don't know whether she would wait any longer than that. And she wouldn't have any real reason to, because eventually her hand is going to be forced and the bill is going to be signed. And I think as long as the conservative Democrats know that, if they're really not interested in moving reconciliation forward, I don't know why they don't just wait it out. They want the projects to start with all deliberate speed, but if they can blame it on somebody else and point very clearly to one other person and say that's the reason that these projects haven't started, not us, but her, and have people grasp it. You say it's just sitting on her desk and she's not sending it. That's something that's pretty simple to understand. People are going to blame her for it, even if they have, progressive leanings and might be still, once it becomes clear that these guys are just not going to move and that reconciliation bill isn't going to happen and Kyrsten Sinema was never going to happen anyway, and you're still sitting on the bill, you might as well build the damn roads. Then I think it begins to happen. So, yeah, I'm not so sure that this is a great solution in the long term, except that, you might as well use this time and this situation to demonstrate exactly what the conservative 9 or whatever the number is now is really up to, which is to say, you want to go first and they want to go first, and I'm offering you a way to both go at the same time, essentially, and you still keep saying no, and everybody's going to recognize that that's unreasonable, but that work needs to be done, and I haven't seen anybody doing it yet. All right, one other thing, I guess, to set things up about what's happening on the House floor, the tweets from yesterday and I guess early this morning from Liam Donovan, who has been, I don't know, well, who is Liam Donovan? Let's see, politics, Hoyas. Okay, wow. Views expressed, mine alone, the Lobby Shop Pod. So I don't think I know what it is, but he's obviously very interested in the policy and procedure. And he's tweeting beginning, 2 days ago, Sunday, I guess, the 22nd. Apparent progress for Dem leadership, but it only takes 4 YOLO mods, he says, in reaction to David Dayen's tweet of August 22nd. The prospect, he says, has learned that several of the 9 conservative House Democrats who insisted to Nancy Pelosi that they would not vote for a budget resolution without a vote on the bipartisan infrastructure package first have flipped. There are no longer 9 Dem holdouts, but that was August 22nd. Donovan goes on then to say, and while there may be less than 9, there are almost certainly 2, and this is a speaker who does not play Russian roulette with her whip count. Here's how I had it heading into the weekend. And heading into the weekend, how could this play out? First, and most likely at this point, the moderates win some sort of last-minute concession, public or private, that allows them to declare victory and support the resolution. That hasn't happened yet. That could come in the form of assurances related to the House calendar, like a September infrastructure vote, or policy priorities in the context of reconciliation, for example, SALT, the state and local tax relief for Gottheimer, Step Up for Costa. The catch for Gottheimer and company is that caving at this juncture likely makes them less credible in the home stretch, meaning they had better make this opportunity count. The least likely outcome would be a public about-face by leadership that allows for the bipartisan bill to go first. Why? They simply don't have the votes. And a last-minute stand by moderates only reinforces the progressive sense that they can't be trusted without mutually assured destruction. And while there are dozens of Republicans who could support IIJA in a vacuum, they won't support the bill so long as it remains linked to the reconciliation effort, nor would Speaker Pelosi put herself in the position of relying on the minority. If the standoff can't be resolved privately, Pelosi will have to choose whether to call the moderates' bluff, a difficult call for a speaker whose proud ethos is I don't go to the floor and lose, or change tacks and delay the vote. That was his guess heading into the weekend. He then continues, Liam Donovan does, and says, given the new DC in the interim, yes, her strategy beyond Rules Committee gamesmanship seems to be to keep up the charade that this will all be sewn up in September. That may get her through the week, but it probably sets up a BIF cave as the surface cliff approaches. He continues on by saying, so, if the votes happen this week as planned, it gets covered as a big win for Pelosi and embarrassing cave for the mods, but if they get what they want in a few weeks, the flex absolutely worked. And maybe Pelosi is fine with that. The White House almost certainly is. So that's a possibility. Somebody else here in response suggests there is some momentum for the Progressive Caucus to extend, but not enough. Biden passed the buck to the states, and I don't think this is going to be good. I expect more talk in the next couple of weeks, but I think we should be talking about this now. That doesn't really clarify anything, but okay. I guess this is all, I don't know whether it's still operational or not, as this was all tweeted on August 22nd, and we've played it out, and I don't know. We'll see. I guess it's possible that this could work out in a way that makes it look initially like a win for Pelosi and a cave for the moderates, but if they eventually get, as is the word this morning, a date certain for the vote on the infrastructure bill as part of a revised rule for the consideration of all this stuff, then I guess that may be enough face saving for them to agree to go ahead with this thing. We'll see. And if the date certain is before October 1st, then I don't know. I mean, nothing really, no face lost there, except that they may, the next question is, does Kirsten Sinema or do any of them hold out on reconciliation? Do they become so emboldened that they say, well, we should take another hostage on the reconciliation bill and say, yes, we won the concession we wanted, but now we've learned that taking hostages works and we demand some other concession. And it's entirely possible that happens. In fact, I discussed it a little bit briefly with Armando yesterday, and Armando was saying, yeah, they might say, well, we need to cut down the total dollar level in reconciliation. And his thought was, well, they might just agree to that. Say, let's do 2.9 trillion instead of 3.5. Might work. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning. I have good news to report. Many more listeners like you are making critical contributions that keep our show on the air. Makes good sense, of course, and patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple. Now you can make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for helping keep you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all of your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Joan McCarter just came running out of the caucus meeting. The reporters that stand around the door, and they get their scoop too. I love it. People come out and just spill the beans on what's going on. Why do you close the door if that's going to happen? I don't know.
Seriously.
That's what goes on, and pretty soon they tweet it, and then we know it, and Joan reads it, and what the hell's going on? You didn't stay up late watching them not do anything. That's good news. That was a smart idea. What do we know?
It was pointless to stay up, but yeah. Okay.
Right. Well, yeah, not only because they didn't get anywhere, but the likelihood that they would do the thing that they came up with right away versus let's come back in the morning, and give everybody a chance to get some sleep. So pointless.
Down a little.
For a number of reasons.
Figure out that they really leave it to moderate conservative Democrats, blue dogs, to take what was a win-win situation and turn it into, as Hoyer said to them, mutually assured destruction.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, they're endangering everything that they worked for. Like Sinema's thing, she's out there touting now in Arizona all the stuff that she got into her Senate bill that these guys are now just about to tank. Because
I guess.
and this is the problem I have with what Greg Sargent was talking about in having them go ahead and pass the Senate bill and Pelosi just hangs on to it.
Yeah.
How are you only have, 4 votes? 3 votes? 4 votes?
Something like that.
You've even got mainstream Democrats who've said, no, I am not going to vote on the Senate bill until we get the budget resolution passed, until we get the reconciliation bill done. I'm not going to do it. Okay. So is she going to... Are there the votes to pass the Senate bill today? I don't think so.
Yeah, maybe not. I imagine they would trust her to hold on to the thing for a while.
They would trust her to hold on to the thing, maybe.
For how long?
But once that vote is done, do they really trust the process? Obviously, the would-be Freedom Caucus of the Democrats has decided they're not going to be trustworthy. They've given the progressives absolutely every reason to distrust them.
Yes, for a long time.
By doing this.
And
by taking this
even, I guess even if there wasn't that record, there's this now.
Yeah.
So, and I guess I was thinking, okay, well, if I'm one of these conservative 9 and Pelosi says, all right, well, I'll tell you what, we'll have the vote, but I'm going to hold the bill until reconciliation is finished, particularly if I also don't care for the reconciliation bill, I'd say, all right, fine, let's have the vote on the infrastructure bill. I vote for it, and then you bring the reconciliation bill, and I vote no. And maybe it passes, maybe it doesn't. But if it doesn't pass, I now turn and say, all right, so how long are you going to hold on to that bill?
Right, we've got to have something.
And I said until
have
it's
something in our districts.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So she holds it and holds it and holds it, and it becomes now August of next year, and they say, we could have been building bridges and roads this whole time. Please release this money so that we can do that. And I mean, I guess you could continue to hold it, but come January 2nd, 2023, that bill's getting signed. You can't hold it anymore.
Yeah.
You can't just kill it by keeping it, unless you're Donald Trump as Speaker, which he'll try something like that. If they were ever to, be that crazy and implement the Matt Gaetz plan in a Republican House. But, it's I don't see how it works.
There's a possible out, and I'm not sure how this is going to play out, but it looks like one effort is from Catherine Clark, one of Pelosi's leadership team, who just dropped a bill this morning that's a sense of the House resolution that mandates a vote on the Senate infrastructure bill by September 28th.
Okay.
So that could be, I mean, it's sense of the House, it's not binding, but if everybody passes that, it's sort of a promise. It might be enough to bind them. It might be enough to mollify.
So that's interesting to do it that way as opposed to in the rule somehow setting the date.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it's just an alternative.
Or they could incorporate it into the rule.
Yeah, that's true too. But they could deem the sense of the House resolution passed with the passage of the rule if they wanted to. But that would seem
right
like just annoyingly convoluted. But okay, so that makes some sense, and it's probably what people would have guessed, right? October 1st is the effective date, essentially, of the infrastructure bill, or at least I guess everything that it funds comes out of next year's budget. So they wait for the start of the fiscal year.
The reauthorization of all the highway stuff, basically, that doesn't, and this is the other thing, it doesn't go into effect until October 1st anyway.
Right.
This whole supposed rationale they have for passing this immediately is, all these shovel-ready projects, we've got to get the money out to them now. It's not going to happen now anyway.
Right.
It wouldn't happen until October 1st anyway.
So September 28th is okay.
Really the only reason the Gottheimer and team are doing this is because they want to get a leg up over the progressives, the squad.
Yeah, I guess. But
Ocasio-Cortez. I think Gottheimer has a real butthurt thing because Ocasio-Cortez gets attention.
Yeah, that could be.
I see nothing in this that makes any sense other than they're trying to own the libs.
I guess so. I was hoping for a better reason, but I can't see it, and I guess that's the only one that's made any sense.
Well, they have no policy.
That's the
things that they're trying to get out of it. Their opposition to the larger bill is just like cinemas. They don't have any specific things that they've got a problem with.
I don't like the number.
They have no policy.
Something like that. Yeah, it's I can't point to anything, and that must be because you're right. There isn't one. I don't know why they would do it otherwise. And I've just been puzzled by, the idea that, we want, I guess, the headline of bipartisan compromise passes, but there's no timing that could possibly be worse for your headline than August, a year before the elections.
Exactly. And they're endangering it passing.
Yeah.
By pulling
this
stunt.
So I'm going to become the new AOC and get all this attention.
By egging this on, by urging these 10 would-be Freedom Caucus types to do this, are tanking the possibility of their own bill passing. I don't understand the rationale at all.
There might
not other than owning the libs.
I guess.
It's a power play
but
that is succeeding in pissing everybody off.
And not succeeding in making them super famous, more famous than AOC, because it's August and the year before. No one cares.
Yeah.
Maybe it works in the Beltway
they're
press.
making a lot of enemies. I really, this makes absolutely no sense to me.
Yeah.
It's really idiotic. And the digging in is
yeah.
I don't get it.
I just saw somebody complaining about that. And a lot of complaints about what they're doing are coming from names in the caucus that ordinarily you might think might align themselves with moderates at some point over something. At least if it's you got to choose a side. It's either we here in the moderates or the wild and crazy squad. There are a lot of people that would say, well, those are my only two choices. I'm with you. But they're saying, I don't get your plan. This is stupid.
Susan Wild. Greg
Yes.
Sargent talked to her, and she says is she a freshman?
I don't know. I'll check while you tell us what you did. We'll find out.
No, she took Dent's seat.
Okay.
So she's kind of a freshman. She was there for the last 2 months of 2018 and is... So anyway, she's one of the frontliners. She's one of the ones who's sort of vulnerable. And her quote, I like Greg's term, sabotage squad. Are you just going to dig your heels in? That's just stupid. It's time to fold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you could very easily have seen her going the other way with a more reasonable strategy, or perhaps on some other bill, or now she won't be there with them because they've annoyed her. So that's really something. But I don't know. Yeah, we'll find out, I guess, at some point later today what the solution may be. And, could be just one of those situations where they say, yesterday this deal was a no, but today this deal with a bow on top is a yes. And
yeah.
Okay, fine, whatever it is.
Supposedly they're closer. Pelosi says, I'm not going to bring it. I'm not going to bring the rule unless I have the votes. And they have scheduled the vote for 1:15.
All right.
So
I guess
apparently she sees it in place. She's not going to have that vote because that's, Pelosi. She doesn't vote until the votes are there. So
here's a tweet from from a little while ago, actually. But let's see. Current plan under discussion. Who's saying this? Lindsay McPherson, who is a senior reporter for Roll Call, saying current plan under discussion is to deem this resolution, I think the sense of the House resolution, to deem the resolution committing to an infrastructure vote by September 28th passed when the resolution is adopted. So
okay.
Sense of the House gets deemed.
You called it.
Awesome. Well, yeah, it was right. Apparently, I called it, but only because I hadn't read this. This, I guess, was tweeted at 9:49 this morning. So I called it after it was done. but still, yeah, it seemed like, a real possibility. And just in terms of, that's a great idea, the Sense of the House resolution. I don't have time right now. I got to get this rule done. We're going to have the vote at 1:15. You're going to have to put it in the rule. We're going to just have to deem
Which
it.
came after the vote at 1:15 was decided after this 7:49 tweet.
Okay.
9:49 for you, 7:49 for me.
Oh, yes. Okay. So, all right. So there's really no other way to handle it, I guess. If we really walked through the whole thing, we would have said, it's a great idea, but there's no time for a vote on something like that. So, although that would have been funny. Well, I promise you a vote on the promise of a vote after you pass the rule. Vote for the rule, and then we'll commit to the date. I don't know why they didn't do that. All right. Well,
I don't understand what this whole power play was for, other than it being a power play.
Yeah, that makes it difficult to know how to handle it. I don't even know what you're doing.
Because you are threatening President Biden's key agenda item for his first term.
Yeah.
This is what they're all running on next year. This is what he's going to run on in 2024, presumably.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Getting this huge thing done that helps lots of people. This is the other part of it. This is really, really good stuff. Yeah, there's all the hard infrastructure, which is wonderful. But you want to continue those tax credits, child tax credits going out monthly to all of your constituents that they love so much? You got to vote for it in this bill. If you don't like that, is that your problem with this bill? Do you not like all the stuff that's helping people?
I like it. But you're going to ask that question.
But actively working against the president, their president, in the first year of his administration is just unbelievable. I just don't get it.
I don't know. And it doesn't make any sense. And I guess it's just, it's another one of those things that, I don't know. Politics being what it is, I guess we're in the post-sense-making era, and Trump taught us all of that. And I did see something the other day where, or maybe was it Cuellar, who's like running ads about, he's doing this, and at the same time they're running ads that are like, I'm solidly behind the Biden-Cuellar agenda. We're moving President Biden's agenda forward as he's, throwing up this roadblock to
Biden's agenda.
But I guess if you have if you have it in you to block the Biden agenda, but advertise at home that it's really, not only are you helping, but it's really the Biden-Cuellar agenda. Everyone knows that. If you can do that, then I guess, we're running around like, no, what's your actual position? And they're just doing the things that they like doing. And I don't know. But I guess that should be an acknowledgement that nobody at home cares about the order of the votes or anything procedural at all. If they're going to accept your ad that you're advancing an agenda you're blocking, so long as it eventually passes, then clearly people don't care about the order in which things happen, and you're wrong. So just vote. But
yeah. Well, there's the other side of this, which is, of course, money. And the fact
involved?
that it's not just Manchin and Sinema, who, are ExxonMobil's go-tos in the Democratic Senate caucus. There's no labels. Joe Lieberman's corporate front group. No labels.
Anyway?
That's been running ads for them. Did you see the ad that they created for the Unbreakable Nine?
No, but it sounds exciting.
It's really, really, really bad. You're going to have to go find that because it's just so awful.
I will make a note. Unbreakable Nine. Okay.
Unbreakable Nine.
Exciting
Now
sounding.
It's 10 because Stephanie Murphy, for whatever reason, decided she had to do it too.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, the Unbreakable Nine, while they were putting this ad together, running through their heads was the theme song for the Magnificent Seven. It's that over the top.
Okay.
Anyway, it's no labels, which is a dark money funneling group that primary objective has seemed to be trying to unseat Nancy Pelosi. Most of their efforts,
unusual.
even during the Trump administration, were focused on trying to undermine Pelosi for whatever reason.
I don't know.
I don't know. So anyway, that's along with Manchin and Sinema, that's who's been basically bankrolling this whole effort. And
all right, no labels.
It's the money.
I guess.
It's all of the dark money groups who don't want the Green New Deal stuff that's in the larger bill to pass. They don't want polluters to be held to account.
I guess that would, at least that would make a certain amount of sense. I oppose it, but I'd understand it. Like, okay, now I understand what people are trying to get done here. And, well, all right, but no labels. I can't believe Joe Lieberman just is, it can't be that he's a force. This is not possible.
I know.
I don't understand, but okay. Well, that may be it. But this should play out at some point later today. It's, Usually,
it should. It looks to me, again, I have a hard time thinking Pelosi's going to have what happened last night happen again.
Yeah.
Where they start the vote and then have to pull it.
I would guess certainly wants to avoid that. I guess there's some possibility they just say, all right, 115, 130, whatever it is, and then at 12:59 they say, yeah, all right, never mind. But she seems to think they've got something nailed down, so we'll find out at some point today. I hope so, because this is a tug of war over nothing, and it would be awfully stupid. It really is,
and that's what's so astounding about it. It's a tug of war over nothing. Everybody had agreed to this. It was a win-win.
Yeah, I mean, they could change their mind, I guess, or maybe they were lying and some of the 9 really didn't support reconciliation, but they were, afraid to say so in caucus meetings at some point. But I don't know why they would be afraid of it. They might, but maybe the real fear is that they'll balk at the last minute at the number and say you got to hold it under that artificial $3 trillion mark or something. Oh,
yeah, that's what you're hearing from Sinema. Although, she's refusing to give any specifics on what she wants out. Where her problem with the $3.5 trillion is just too big of a number.
Yeah.
She won't do the hard work of saying, okay, well, we can't fund this at this level. We can't fund that at this level. This is the thing in it I really don't like. Mm-hmm. She won't do that. Yeah. And neither will the House members. Neither will these would-be Freedom Caucus folks.
It's hard to do. And I guess the indicator that she won't do it is if we start hearing things about, well, I think there should be an across-the-board cut, across-the-board reductions. Just reduce everything by X percent so that it gets to $2.9 trillion, which, be a horrible solution for almost anything. But that's the signal that I don't know. I want $3 trillion. Well, that's a lot of money. Now, $2 trillion is a lot also, by the way. But the days are gone when, I guess you could get away with saying, well, just keep it under $1 trillion because, inflation
and
being
what
the
Progressive Caucus is going to remind everybody is that, they were asking for $6 trillion.
Right.
This is their compromise.
Yeah.
They've come down. And, they were smart in setting a high number to come down from, but they did come down.
They did. And, so now I guess it's a question of, well, would they concede one more time from 3.5 down to 2.9, to which they could say that's actually technically just less than half, so it's a big win for you guys. You got us to less than half of what we were looking for. Right. Would that be enough, to get Kirsten Sinema to say, oh, well, it's not $3 trillion, it's 2.9, 2.99999. But it's not 3, and that's the important thing, because people hate 3s, I guess. That's the whole substance of the position so far, because it's, as you mentioned, it's never, well, this is all wrong. This is a bad program. And if you get rid of it, then as a consequence, we'll end up at 2.9 trillion. It's just, I don't know, everything's good except 3.
Yeah.
It's so dumb, 3. Okay.
Okay, we have new news from the Rules Committee from Chairman McGovern. We're going to self-execute in this rule a resolution from my Massachusetts colleague, Rep. Catherine Clark, that's a commitment to have the president's bipartisan infrastructure bill considered in the House no later than, not September 28th, but September 27th.
It's a huge win. Gottheimer won a day. That's 24 hours. That's nothing to sneeze at. Oh, my God. Although, then it becomes out. Clark said, well, I wanted to do it at 12:01 a.m. on the 28th, and he only got 11:59 on the 27th out of me, so it's only a couple minutes. But all right, fine. And self-execute, that's a deal.
That's what it takes.
Okay. Well, they need an extra day, maybe. I don't know what day of the week is September 28th. Maybe September 27th makes more sense, and they need a chance to... What if the vote gets... something on the 27th. Well, then we still have the 28th and the 29th and the 30th. But
you know what? I'm on vacation that week, so I don't care.
Good plan. That's a great idea. All right. Well, that's news, and at least we get to see that happening, and we'll see whether that makes it work. And if I find out later on that, Gottheimer insisted on the 27th, and that was really the reason, I'll really be entertained at the very least. Okay.
Meanwhile, I'm really wishing that they would just go ahead and deem the debt ceiling invalid, suspended in this rule as well.
Right. Or, and as we've pointed out, they didn't bother to take advantage of, or so far haven't put anything in reconciliation instructions.
If they had put this in the budget resolution, you might have ended up avoiding a lot of this. I don't know for sure that you would have, but it really could have helped.
Could have been leveraged at even Mansion and Cinema Care. Right?
Oh, well, Gottheimer, with his ties to finance,
okay,
would probably not be as willing to have this fight if it was also debt ceiling. There would be countervailing pressure on him.
That could have been. I wonder what. Yeah, I wonder if he has any plans for the debt
frogs
ceiling.
had wings.
Well, yeah. Does he? I guess we haven't gotten to that yet, but now I'd be curious to ask him. What are your thoughts on the debt ceiling and how you're going to get past any intransigence from Republicans on it, and are you worried about that? And I don't know, just curious. I mean, it would be something to talk about that would be more unifying, for instance, or like, what if none of your infrastructure projects can happen because we've defaulted on the debt? Is that a worry for you?
I'm having a really hard time understanding why Schumer decided to have this fight.
I don't know. Yeah.
When there are so many other fights to be had. It's going to be a really miserable fall, Kagro. In Congress land.
Well, yeah. Plus they may all have COVID by that point.
Well, then there's that too.
Yes.
I mean, they're sort of dropping like flies. So far, I haven't seen that anybody is really sick. Whether they would tell us if anybody's really sick.
Cyber ninjas are.
The cyber ninjas are.
As it turns out. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I believe the Senate president.
Prayers.
Right. Well, not yet. I need to audit those prayers. I'm not certain that they're valid. So you send them to me, and then if I approve of them, I'll let God have them after that. So I think it's only fair. But yeah, apparently I don't know whether I trust Karen Fan, but she says they're really sick, which I guess leads us to believe that they were unvaccinated, which of course is perfect. Naturally, the cyber ninjas wouldn't be vaccinated, but I don't know. I see that on your agenda was the FDA approval, which came through yesterday. And I don't know why the ninjas didn't. Maybe they were waiting for the approval. I don't know.
I'm very much hoping now that we've got the approval, we see the mandates, the vaccine mandates, really come down. Pentagon's already done it. They had said a couple weeks ago that they were going to, but now it's very much official.
Good. Okay. We'll start to see those things. I don't know whether there'll be a federal government one or if that's even possible.
There really needs to be one for travel.
Okay.
That would make a big difference,
I think. That would make some sense. Yeah.
And, I would really like to see now be the point where we start totally shunning people who refuse to get vaccinated.
Yes.
The people who can't be vaccinated, that's one thing. The people who have immune compromised issues and the children, of course.
But you'll see them in masks.
But, if you don't have a good medical reason not to be vaccinated, you do not deserve to be operating in free society. You got to figure out how to shun them.
And I guess the insurance companies might start thinking about that too. And I do see hints that they are considering, at the very least, raising premiums on people who are, willfully risking their health and the health of other people that they cover.
And that one's tricky because of the Affordable Care Act. I'm not sure how that can be done.
I don't know.
With the Affordable Care Act and its restrictions on what insurance companies can do.
Yeah, definitely.
But there's got to be something.
Difficult.
There's got to be something.
Yeah, I mean, the instinct is to say, well, yeah, we should, I don't know, refuse you hospitalization. But we just fought so hard for making sure everybody could get health care, etc. But interestingly, when you float things like that, the conservatives come out to say, oh, I thought you were for blah, blah, blah. Oh, I am. I'm just glad to see you are too. I thought you were against health care as a universal right. But
my body, my choice.
I see you may need it. All right. Well, we should know a lot more by the end of the day. I guess by the end of next week, all will be clear. And next Tuesday's visit should be a breeze.
Yeah.
I'm guessing. Am I unwise?
I'm not going to ever hold my breath, Kagro. Not ever.
Okay. Well, that's also a wise decision. Well, thank you for coming by today and discussing this stuff. I'm glad you didn't stay up too late and worry yourself with unnecessary nonsense. You can always wake up and find more nonsense in the house the next day. Good advice. Okay, John, we'll catch up with you then, and I'll see you on the Twitters in between when we find out what the hell happens with this thing.
Absolutely.
All right, take care. We're going to wrap things up and hand it all over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast and Cookbook Speakeasy next here on Netroots Radio. See you next week, John.
From netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, the Biden administration up next with Justice suing Facebook after an explosive New York Times investigation revealed the company covered up the truth about its anti-vaccine posts. Very interesting story here. I saw that developing. Wish I could have gotten into that earlier, but luckily you have Justice doing it for you next.